the vendors themselves, the practitioners, the consultancies, so we're all speaking the same language. Always important to bring it back to all of you. This group who's doing this work is why we're here. If you want to get plugged in, if you haven't already, we encourage you to go get FinOps certified, which will give you this fancy badge to get plugged into your LinkedIn and all those other areas. And with that, housekeeping is done. We're going to get into the meat of the content, starting with some member introductions led by Ms. Stacy Case.
Hello, everyone again. So happy to be here. Also, I just want you guys to know this is my third training or summit that we've done out of my trailer. And hopefully my last. I know that you guys all have been really excited about me traveling in my trailer, but this is my last one, hopefully. So we do have some great folks that are going to introduce themselves, some individual practitioners, along with a couple of our vendors who are new, and one specifically that hasn't had a chance to introduce himself before because of a technical thing. So I'm really excited for each person to just give a really quick introduction of who you are. If you're a vendor, what are you working on? Why are you guys doing FinOps? And then of course, what are you really good at in FinOps? So just, we're going to run through these. As you guys know, this is the fun thing where after I introduce them, we'll switch over to another screen and they each get 30 seconds. And yes, we run that timer on them. So it's always a little bit of fun to do that. So let's start with Johan. So we have Johan from Schneider Electric. We're going to have Noah from Stormforge, David from Mindcurve, Michael from Verticent, Tiffany and Gentry from Instructure, and then Udam from Citi. So we have several people. So we're going to start with Johan.
Okay, hello everybody. As was mentioned, I work for Schneider Electric and I am an IT enterprise architect. Well, the main reason because I'm here is because cost control, cost allocation of our IT infrastructure, as well as transparency, are one of the main challenges that we have in our organization. We would like to learn about frameworks and tools that we can use to execute proper cost management, as well as how to deploy them effectively. I'm not an expert in this field. I'm open to learn as much as I can. Sorry.
Awesome. And thanks, Johan. I just want to let everybody know Johan's very new to the foundation too. So thank you for being willing to do this. We appreciate it. All right, Noah from Stormforge.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm the open source advocate over at Stormforge. I'm also a CNCF ambassador. We're a vendor in the optimization space, all about Kubernetes applications and anything you can express in YAML. We care about optimization from the standpoint of both financial and environmental impact. So we're putting a lot of effort into that cloud waste efficiency, and we'll probably be reaching out to a lot of folks about talking and joining panels and things like that, because we're trying to get that discussion really popular.
Yes, we love that. We love getting our practitioners involved in different panels and calls out there. So that's awesome. Thanks, Noah. David with Mindcurve.
Hi, everyone. So I'm David, Solutions Architect and FinOps Lead from Mindcurve. So as a platform engineering and operations company, so FinOps is simply part of our managed service. When we run our platform, we enable all engineers to take ownership of their costs and to optimize themselves. So we believe in full transparency and making informed decisions, always trading off cost efficiency against other important factors, speaking of reliability, availability, performance, and security. Often we see that the client's top priority is time to market and growth, ignoring cost efficiency, which can hurt your business badly at a later point. Luckily, FinOps is here to help, as it can mitigate that risk for you and keep your business going while growing.
David, seems like you've had to, I was going to say, you've had to give this a couple of times, it sounds like, let people know. Thanks, David, appreciate that. Michael from Verticent, we've got you this time.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Michael Kearns, CEO of Verticent. We're a cloud solutions provider, and we actually are part of a group of hundreds of software companies, and we struggled with managing cloud costs ourselves. So we developed the technology and services solution for ourselves and our global footprint of companies that we've now launched to customers. And we're here really to learn from everyone else about the challenges and continue to improve our own FinOps disciplines. We're excited to be here.
Thanks, Michael. We love having you guys here too. We always appreciate your help. So awesome. And then we have Tiffany and/or Gentry from Instructure. I'm not sure which one's speaking.
I'll go. I'm Tiffany Taggart. I'm the Engineering Financial Operations Manager at Instructure. And I've been working FP&A roles at tech companies for the last few years, primarily supporting engineering teams and their hosting expense. So that's kind of the strength I bring to this new role at Instructure, where I'm embedded within the engineering department for the first time to establish a FinOps organization. And we're currently working on doing a deep dive analysis of our AWS costs, what the specific drivers of those costs are in order to develop a better forecasting model.
Love it. You say forecasting model and folks get very excited here.
A plug too, if you go to FinOps.org, we have a forecasting playbook that we just launched last month, if you want to check that out.
Yes.
Projects.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. And then finally, we've got Udam from Citi. So,
hey, everyone. Oh, yeah, I'm here. Hey, quick intro. I'm the head of cloud financial management for Citi. So that's responsible for cost reporting, billing integration, chargeback, cost optimization, budgeting, forecasting, cost controls. For a very custom platform we're building geared towards financial services across multiple cloud vendors and SaaS vendors. Prior to this, I was at TO, where I worked on many different products for cloud management and optimization. At Citi, where we're struggling is finding solutions to do those 5 things that I said across all of these SaaS vendors and public cloud providers. Sorry, I think I might have taken too much time.
That's okay. I was just looking at the chat as you were talking, and apparently I did not know we had a rock star in our midst, as everybody was just really excited to see you.
Yeah,
so thank you.
A lot of these folks.
Thank you so much. Just so thank you to everyone that just introduced themselves. We do reach out to folks every month to ask them to introduce themselves. And I know it's kind of a tough thing for some people to do, to get up in front of a couple hundred people and say hi, but we really appreciate it. And with that, JR, I'll turn it back over to you.
And I got distracted by the chat there too. Great to have you all here. Thanks for the introductions. Citi is interesting. Also, I think we've noticed this huge trend of financial services companies joining the foundation in the last year. So if you're in FinServ or banking or any of those, we're actually starting a SIG. We've got about 173 banks and financial institutions around the world now. So you can check that out in the Slack as well. I think there's a financial services room. So one of the main topics today is, and kind of one of the topics that always comes up when someone joins the foundation new, is how do I start getting my organization understanding what the hell FinOps is and getting buy-in about executives saying, I want to support it, getting engineers to think about it. How do I get the ball rolling? So this wasn't in our initial content plan for the year, but it keeps coming up over and over again. So we thought we would restart a special interest group that we had last year on adopting and adapting FinOps in a lot of ways. Ashley Ramatko put her hand up to lead this. Ashley has been kind of a star in the FinOps community, I feel like, the last 2 years. She has that badge, the charter member badge that only 26 have. None of you who don't have that can ever get that. That was the original group who started this back in the day. And she's been doing this at Pearson at massive scale across lots of different clouds for a long time, and also interfacing with the sort of IT side and the TPM side and all those folks as well. So really glad to have you leading this, Ashley. I'll pass it over to you, but looking forward to seeing the content and also hearing about the working group.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's always nice a couple years ago going and trying to figure out what my job's going to be and finding the website. I think it was, only launched a month when I found your guys' website. So I always reference it. You guys helped me figure out what I was doing to begin with. But I'm really, really excited about this group. It's the number one question I get often too, is like, how do you even sell a FinOps group? How do you pitch it? How do you get your team to buy into it? And so I think that this will be really helpful to a lot of folks that are maybe on that early stages where you're part of the community and you're kind of an individual and you see this need in your company and you want to launch this, but you need maybe like that supplemental material of how to like pitch it. So that's one of the personas that we really see. So that individual. And I think there's another persona in adopting FinOps, and that's really the executive teams. We have to remember that this is a new concept to them as well. And so they're going to be looking for like, how can they measure it? How can they support a FinOps team? Like they're going to give you some type of funding or personnel to do this. They're also going to need to be able to adopt to a new FinOps practice within their organization in the shift that's going to occur. We also feel like there's another persona, which is, you actually have a FinOps team and you're executing, so you're in the process of building it. We're going to kind of keep that persona out of this work group just because we feel like there's other, there's the framework work going on. There's other kind of work groups that are really around when you're built. So we're really focused on that individual that's trying to sell it for the first time, and then that executive team that's trying to support it for the first time. So that's kind of our primary focus here. Go next slide, JR. So diving into this, we said often we get asked, like, how do you create a FinOps practice within your organization? And the response is instantly get your executive buy-in first, right? And so this working group will be kind of curating content that can be customized for your company to help make sure you can pitch bringing the FinOps practice to your organization. We'll get together and we'll kind of build out what this is. Ultimately, we've got some sample slide decks that we started with. We've started a little bit of an outline, like if you could only do 10 decks to your executive team to get FinOps, what are you going to put in that 10 slide deck? And then we could see this kind of pivot into, so now you've pitched it to your executive team, you maybe need to pitch it to your finance teams as well. And so that's our goal of this, is really to help curate that content that will be available to anybody in the organization. Next slide here. We're obviously going to start off right away of explaining what FinOps is. So a lot of you have already seen this slide before, brings financial accountability to the variable spend. That is something that we need to make sure our executive teams understand right off the bat and kind of differentiates us from some finance organizations. Go next slide. We'll want to define what success looks like. So this is another good slide that's put together, and what we'll want to do is make sure people can customize these slides themselves and add what they believe success will look like and what they think will target their executive team as well. I wanted to kind of share a little bit with you guys about Pearson and kind of how I had to go about pitching FinOps. And so what was really, really important to us is to find something that was really relatable to our executive team. So our executive team, they know about cloud, they know about the AWS well-architected framework. We preach that a lot to them. Our Amazon teams, spell that out very, very well. And so it was really important for me to do a correlation between, well, we believe in the well-architected framework. That framework has multiple pillars. One of the last pillars on it is the cost optimization pillar. And at that time, we didn't have anything around this. We kind of had people doing kind of a little bit of this job, but we weren't putting a lot of focus on it. And so I don't have the picture here, but we kind of showed like a pillar, all these different pillars holding up our products, right? And we were missing one of the pillars, which was cost optimization. And if you're missing one of your pillars, your whole thing's going to lean, right? And so that was kind of our initial pitch. And so it was really important, I think, when you go to pitch your executive teams, you frame this into something that's going to be familiar with them. And so this is kind of what we did, is we need to add this additional pillar. They're going to be responsible for cloud financial management, billing management, and making sure we're doing effective cost management of our resources. And so this is the type of material I would hope that this working group would come out with, is things that are tangible, but also can be customized for your organization as well. Another slide deck that we presented to our executive teams was like the placement of this team. This often comes up a lot, of like, where should FinOps org sit? And so you'll again want to like create your slide decks that adapt to this, but it's important that you do, probably call out this. And so what we kind of pitched is, yes, our dev teams are decentralized. Our SRE teams are centralized today. We believe that our FinOps team should also be a centralized service that sits with other core cloud foundation teams. So with our observability, monitoring teams, or release engineering. So FinOps is just part of that core foundation team that is a service out to the businesses. And we really pitched that this is the best way to get economies of scale. We would reduce costs. It would be a very simplified model. It would be a way for our executive teams to have direct visibility into our cloud spend. And the nice thing about FinOps too, when we do a FinOps pitch to executive teams, is we have something that a lot of new projects, new groups don't have, which is we have dollars that we can put behind it. And so very similar, we did a pitch to the team that was like, we have X millions in annual AWS spend, which is supporting X billion of digital revenue per finance. And so kind of correlating like the concept of how massive our spend is and how important it is because of the revenue that it supports. And I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but really honing in on that revenue, that total cost of ownership here, those are keywords that are going to drive to your executive teams. We also wanted to explain the complexity of our state, right? We have AWS, misspelled there, AWS, Azure, GCP as well. We also want to talk about where we're going. So we still have 10 large data centers to be migrated, right? And so we're not done on our cloud journey. We have to optimize what we already have, but we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for what's coming next. We also want to talk about the the capacity. So, we're building this team. We need a certain number of individuals. We're going to be supporting 40 SRE teams, 880 applications, right? So this is really powerful when you can present these type of numbers at an executive teams. And somebody asked, what is INO? So that's our team. It's called Infrastructure and Operations. That's where our FinOps team sits inside of that org. And then as far as opportunity, so again, we want to talk about where we were at. We were not doing so well, 4 years ago, 30% RI coverage. We had a base rate. We knew that we could optimize that base rate. And if we did that, we were going to save X millions of dollars. And so here again is another kind of powerful slide that you can put in front of your executive team. And then this was really important, is to visualize and explain the who are we, right? So I'm gonna fund you. I'm gonna give you tools. I'm gonna give you team. Like, what are you going to do? And so this was really a visual that we pointed out to them is, you may not want your finance team, talking directly to your cloud vendors. You don't want probably every SRE lead talking directly to your executive teams. And so our FinOps team here is, I would say it's like put a hug around all of this, or to be supporting all of this. And so as a FinOps analyst that we have in our teams, they are going to be working directly with finance to understand fully loaded costs. We're going to work with the business owners to help them benchmark and understand, where their optimizations are within their products. We're going to get that real-time data out to the SRE team so that they can make updates on the fly. We're going to be optimizing our rates and working on education programs with our cloud vendors. And then ultimately, we wanted to give those executive teams the security that we are going to set up the guardrails and visibility, that they don't have to, worry about cloud as much because you have a team that is worrying about it. And so this was another good pitch that we just explained, like how we're going to operate. So this is what I see as kind of growing out of this working group, is creating additional slide decks and creating additional material. Like we may have like a slide deck for your elevator pitch, your vision, your mission, maybe your core competencies, right? So there we could have a variety of slide decks that people can then go ahead and pull and choose from, and then adapt them for what works for their business. And going to the second, going to the second kind of persona that we saw here was really that executive team. So they may be asking how do you support a FinOps practice? Like, okay, I've gotten it now. What do we do after that? What do you need from me? And so we really need our executive teams taking action and being knowledgeable. We want them to be investing their time to understand cloud. We need them there to support different policies that we may enact. We want them to help us build incentive programs that people can get behind. And at times we're going to need them to make executive mandates. And so all of those are kind of the asks that we're asking out of our executive teams. And so I think a big part of the FinOps Foundation is we can help equip our executives to be prepared to help support a FinOps organization. Here's a good example of one that we did at our company just months ago. I wanted to pitch that we, had an investment opportunity that we could buy more 3-year savings plan. So while working with the FinOps Foundation, I was able to ping 4 different companies one-on-one through Slack and kind of ask, what is your coverage? How many are you buying 3 years? And like, why did you do that? Why did you make that decision? And so using the foundation to kind of benchmark, I could go back to my company and say, hey, listen, here's some different companies that are in our same area or same category of spend. We're up there as coverage, same as the other companies are, but we're really, really low on our 3-year commit. And so I think that we should increase that, and we should think about the reasons why we should. And so, a good example here is like company A, they went 100% 3-year. I kind of wish they didn't do that because they would have left more room for spot migration considerations. So that's something I want our executive team to be aware of as well, why I wouldn't jump 100% 1 year, right? Company B has a good story to tell. They're at 90% coverage. They're completely out of the data center. That seems pretty reasonable that they kind of coast on that 90%, knowing that they don't have more coming. We have a lot in the data center coming, so we feel pretty confident riding the high 90s. You've got company C who 100% coverage, 100% 3 years, but they didn't buy up front. Now they may be losing some discount points, but they brought up a really good point that it causes a lot of billing overhead. That was an awesome thing to also explain to my executive team, to let them know the additional burden that it does put on my team when doing the bill because we buy up front. And then company D was very interesting. They were 90% average, and they had no 1-year commit. And it was interesting that after I, got this information 3 weeks later, company D actually sold off a big part of their business. And so there was probably a financial reasons of why they decided not to do that. So given those conversations, we ended our executive training talking about this, describing what savings plan are, kind of coming up what we wanted to do next. And we decided that our next savings plan purchase, we would go more in the 3-year. And we're waiting for some reorganizations of stuff to happen. as well. And so this was a really powerful way to, you know, present data to an executive team and let them be part of the decision making as well. And then I think my last slide here just kind of represents our FinOps impact. And so talk about build and rebuilding. I'm working on trying to pitch to our executive team to let us do the same thing that we've done for AWS and take that into multi-cloud, so Azure and GCP. And so this was a really helpful slide deck that we put together that said, you know, here's been our forecast over the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, and here's where our actuals have come in. And what's interesting is I'm trying to pitch them to invest more in our FinOps team. And around like 2016, 2017, we actually went with a third party to manage our bill and our pricing strategy. And they did fine. They did, you know, it was okay. But what we saw is a tremendous amount of growth. And we were just keep spending more money and we weren't really doing much optimization. And so around 2018 is when we launched our Pearson FinOps team. We consolidated some individuals that were doing that work together. And you can see for the first time in 2019, we actually started turning our spend downwards with doing optimization work. The other thing you can see as a trend is our forecast is growing versus before it was flat. And so we've worked with finance so they understand we can't just keep the cloud flat forever, right? And so this is again, I think another good visual to give an executive team. And so that's what kind of material I'm hoping this working group will build out here as well. So with that, I also want to introduce Mike and Dean. We just talked about how Accenture is joining as our newest premier member, and I'm really, really excited about this. These guys are both, you know, FinOps strategists, cloud optimization experts, and so it's going to be really good to be partnering with them on this work group. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. That was good content. I love your slides. Okay, so quick introduction. I'm Mike Eisenstein. I'm joined by my colleague, Dean Oliver, and I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. I've been working in hyperscale public cloud governance for 7 years, cloud of some form for over 13 years. I've been running Accenture's cloud optimization practice for the last 2 years. So go to the next slide. I want to take you on a little bit of a journey. It was July of 2014 when we hit a milestone that probably many of you have hit, which was when we got to 2 million lines in the cloud bill, in the AWS bill, which meant that we could no longer manage it through Excel. And so I was reflecting on the journey that we've been through, and we've tried all kinds of databases and all kinds of technologies and ideas. And it's been one curveball after another in this space. I do see the science of some of these third-party tools starting to catch up with the data and starting to, you know, mesh more nicely with the FinOps operation. I think the technology is ahead of, you know, process and procedure. On the technical side, if you look at things like this cluster of Orbitera kind of top right, we went live with it in July of 2018, and the next month it got acquired by Google, and then a year and a half later, they announced end of life or divestiture. We've since then seen the emergence of some stable vendors, and I think a lot of the acquisitions, the big acquisitions, are behind us. But, you know, as you've heard even just from the intros on this call, there are, you know, new vendors in the space. There continues to be you know, innovation going on there. But I do see an overall stabilization of the technical capability. You have technical things like, you know, sustained use discounts on the top left, committed use discounts, savings plans. We're also starting to see those, I think, stabilize somewhat. But I anticipate the cloud providers are going to continue to innovate in pricing models, which means more cost-effective ways to buy cloud, but it also means more churn for management. And I think that's going to be an ongoing part of the program, is handling that change. But when you get into, you know, some of sorry, if you look at the bottom right, December 2016, thanks for the arrow there, we were getting our monthly gut punch. So with our monthly bill, and this is what my boss called it at the time, our monthly gut punch. And we embarked on our cost optimization exercise, and we shaved off a ton of money, and we did it just in time. You can see in March of 17, just in time for cuts to come out. So that's the kind of thing that I think we will continue to see. If you look at the multi-legged thing up on top center, on 3 separate occasions, we broke Azure's billing system because our detailed billing data was so large. Now, Azure was great. They worked with us and they fixed this in days, or in one case, it was a couple of weeks. But we're going to continue to see that, you know, the limitlessness of cloud actually has limits, just like, you know, service limits that often go ignored until something breaks. Yeah, but I think where the real opportunity is on the organizational, the practical, the practitioner, and frankly the political side. It's very much another story. So if you look at the bottom left, an early example of this was where one of our clients got cloud management and showback working in 6 weeks, but took over a year to get their SAP to where they could journal money between departments and thereby do chargeback. So it was less about cloud management and more about the financial processes. If you look at like the bottom center, in middle of 2017, one of Accenture's leaders made a really bold decision to allow a central team to keep money from RI arbitrage, which meant we were buying them centrally and keeping some of the benefit. And we funded a lot of really good innovation out of that. But as many of you could probably guess, it was a very charged, very political decision, cost a lot of political capital. So we've had to do a lot to mature that conversation so it's not so politically expensive. This is one of the things that I look forward to working with Ashley's Adopting FinOps working group. So anyway, we've been working on this stuff, figuring out how to do it for several years now. Our first cost optimization project was just a few months after we did it internally. We realized that some of the models we had built, we could apply to clients. We actually worked with one of the prominent members of FinOps Foundation. If you look at kind of bottom right, the first FinOps client target operating model we did in August of 2019. It was barely called FinOps at the time. I think actually that's when you became a charter member, right? That's when things really were just getting going. So we've been participating in the space that is now called FinOps, and I've worked with actually some of the organizations on this call to develop the practice. And so anyway, we're formalizing our relationship with the foundation. We want to work with the broader community. We see a lot to do in this space. We see that the impact of cost of cloud on organizations is a really big impact. The Andreessen Horowitz article, I thought, quantified that very profoundly, even if I think there are some caveats to what they described. I'm excited about the growth. I mean, like, what are we getting? 10% month over month, JR? And I've seen the FinOps Foundation mature a lot in just the last year. The first State of FinOps survey was amazing stuff. I'm really looking forward to the second one coming up. So I encourage everyone to participate in that. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dean, who's been sort of my partner in crime developing this science for several years now.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. So I'm Dean Oliver. I'm part of Accenture's technology strategy and advisory practice, and I'm leading on cloud FinOps offerings in this space. Now, my background over the last 12 years has been primarily in major transformations to help organizations put in place new IT operating models, and more specifically enterprise portfolio management practices and the associated enabling technologies. Now, a lot of the principles and practices around investment portfolio management really translate into some of the core components of the FinOps space I've found. And over the last couple of years, I've transitioned formally that experience into FinOps. And I've been helping a number of large-scale global organizations basically adopt FinOps, and a lot of the points that Ashley said really resonated. And I've been doing that with both the central FinOps teams in terms of helping organizations set up that team, and also in the wider organization adoption. So in terms of the theoretical side, yes, that's really important. And if we move on to the next slide, but also in terms of my transformation experience, I've been in the weeds with the organizations, right from theoretical all the way to the end, whether that be a year, 2 years later, and getting the battle scars essentially of some of the problems that I've been seeing in the Slack channels around deep in the weeds things of how do you make the showbacks equal the chargebacks? How do you apportion correctly the shared service costs and also the benefits attributions if you're making central commitments, for example, and create transparency on that. And all of those really detailed things, we want to make sure that we're harvesting and formalizing so that we can use them within the FinOps Foundation and put them into other organizations to help accelerate this adoption. Now, this is a typical FinOps journey that we've been using as part of our overall transformations and helping clients come on with. And I think one of the things that we're seeing, especially in the assessment phase, is this is optional. So you've got two personas of clients. You've got the proactive clients that we're seeing who have really came in advance of moving material workloads to the cloud. They're on the front foot, they understand what FinOps is, and they skip the assessment because it's greenfield essentially. And we move through this process with them and help them implement those guardrails essentially up front, and draw on a lot of the techniques and principles in order to do FinOps right. But what we're then seeing, especially in a lot of the global organizations who are on the front foot with cloud, is they're very reactive on FinOps. The costs have spiraled out of control. The C-suite members are shouting at them to get them back under control, and they've suddenly decided that FinOps is relevant. And they generally go right through an assessment. And this is something, again, that we've built out, which helps them pinpoint areas of the FinOps framework, essentially, that are flagging bright red and are hotspots to fix. And then they move more through a rapid type version of this journey in order to fix some of the more deep underlying rooted problems that have caused them not to achieve their expected value from their investment in cloud. So if you just move to the next slide, as I was saying, in terms of the FinOps Foundation and Accenture, what we want to try and do is, leading from Mike's view of how Accenture have moved right the way through cloud financial operations delivery over the last 6 years, and also the fact that Accenture are 96% in the cloud themselves as a company, we want to make sure all those detailed sets of information are captured, or they've already been captured, and that we can start to use that to collaborate on thought leadership with the FinOps Foundation and make this real for all of the other organizations, and to help them and to help give back, really. We want to also make sure from an advanced perspective that we're driving the hyperscalers and the cloud providers to take into account some of these things when we're not seeing them in the cloud native tooling or in the cloud cost management tooling. So organizations aren't waiting 6 months to fix these things in the tool, and they can just be accelerated straight away from the moment they get that tool in place. And then from an adoption perspective, again, specifically to Ashley's points, we want to make sure that all those stickiest challenges, that we're really getting in place the key components of what they need to do, how they can overcome these challenges quickly, and things like making engineers accountable for the spend, how we really use gamification and some of the techniques we've drawn out to accelerate that and embed FinOps and make sure that it's not just an isolated central FinOps function, but we've really unpacked it into the organization and drawn on all of the different perspectives that come into it. And then finally, in terms of the expansion, starting to look at other things in more rich detail, like the unit economics and the business value top down, and how they can really see how they're getting the value from the cloud spend. And it's very, very easy to see it from a theoretical perspective, but actually tracing business metrics through to the cloud infrastructure and the spend in the past, it's so difficult. So all of those expansion points, we really want to not just give, but we want to learn as well and collaborate and make sure that we're bringing the best of this foundation to fully resolve these problems and see where they fit within the foundation and the FinOps framework. That's everything from me. Thanks, Jar.
Thank you, Dean and Mike. Welcome. Excited to have you here. And yeah, these slides are great. I hope we can borrow some of this for our larger storyline about how to help adopt FinOps. On that topic, yeah, this working group is kicking off. Ashley, again, thanks for leading this. If you want to get involved, put your hand up in this channel, Adopting FinOps. You can follow along or actually spend time. The working group model is these groups spend 4 to 6 weeks spending real time, building out decks, building out playbooks, etc. So if you want to be part of that, that's here. There's going to be a meeting coming up on July 16th. Easy button is email Tracy, who you're going to hear from later, about how to get involved, and she can help get you plugged in all the various places. As part of Accenture joining as a premier member, they're also going to be joining our governing board, which is great. So Mike's going to help us figure out, strategy and where we invest to support the practitioner community. We've got a fantastic group of folks on here. There will be elections coming for this group starting in August. We're going to talk about elections today for the Technical Advisory Council. We have additional practitioner seats and vendor seats that are opening up here as well. So stay tuned for that. And with that, only about 6 or 7 minutes behind, we've got about 15 minutes for the conversation on containers. This has been a long running one for us. Very happy for the first time to, I think, officially have Chris Anisic on the FinOps Foundation call.
I'm not completely up to speed on exactly what we're discussing here.
Oh, that looks like I need to mute everybody. That was not Chris. So Chris is the guy who brought us into the Linux Foundation. Chris, you have, I think, the longest list of presently open job roles that I've ever seen on here. I don't know how you come up with all of it, but thank you for making the time to talk about the new survey results and cover our panel. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, cool. You're steering, I'm assuming.
Yeah, will do.
Oh, awesome. So yeah, great to meet everyone here. You know, like JR said, it's I think it's been at least a couple of years since we had our first discussion before the FinOps Foundation became part of the Linux Foundation family of foundations. I had the fun job of starting a sister organization called the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is all dedicated to containers, Kubernetes, orchestration, you know, kind of the, let's call it the software building blocks and open source projects that kind of companies use to kind of run their infrastructure on scale. So, you know, a little bit less practitioner focused, more kind of developer code focused, but definitely a lot of overlap as a lot of people in our community are, you know, deploying the software, using it at scale, and essentially, you know, running into cost management issues and figuring out how to do chargeback and all this stuff. So it's kind of a great overlap we have amongst the organizations. And one of our first initial collaborations was this essentially FinOps for Kubernetes survey that we, you know, put together. We have essentially a panel here today also that will, you know, have some questions to discuss. I don't know if you want to discuss Kapil and Vittori, JR, before I kind of dive into the quick.
Yeah, could each of you do a quick 30-second intro, and then we'll get into the content questions.
Yeah, we actually, yeah, we definitely have.
All right, sorry, folks, 1 second. I'm going to hard mute everybody, and then I'm going to unmute the speakers.
No, I don't.
Because for some reason.
It's muting me. I don't know why it's muting.
1 second. This is the blessing and the curse of having the open call, is sometimes we get a little overlap.
There, is that better? Yep, that's fine. Yeah.
Kapil, can you go ahead and kick off?
I think there's a guy named Martin Feltz that keeps going on.
Yeah,
and
I
off.
just
So you could just,
call,
yeah,
so
perfect, beautiful.
All right. Don't be Martin, guys.
All
right, go ahead.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here. I'm Kapil Sharma. I'm the Senior Engineering Manager for a cost transparency team at Expedia Group. I'm responsible for helping build in-house multi-cloud FinOps platform for Expedia, and I've been at it for the last couple of years now.
Hey, Vittorio Barris here from Cerence. I've been heading the FinOps practice at our company from going from a lift and shift monolith all the way into a Kubernetes stack, container-based software stack, and been focused on financial goals, but now we're really getting into efficiencies through our containers.
Oops, Chris, I think I muted you in that moment. Let me get you unmuted here. There you go. Should be
awesome. No, awesome, cool. Yeah, so we'll go over some of the kind of the results from the survey, and to me it's a little bit fascinating. Our community was asking for essentially more data, more input from how people are actually doing cost management in Kubernetes land, because historically, the cloud native world, from the CNCF context, a lot of developers were just used to, they were very excited that they didn't have to kind of deal with the old world of, provisioning infrastructure, going through Jira tickets or all this thing. They could just go willy-nilly spin up, Kubernetes namespaces and go without any, effect until the finance folks chased after them. And so we were trying to get some data, from, hey, how are people doing this within our, community? What lessons can we kind of share and just kind of start the conversation, overall. So I'll go through this fairly quick before asking our panel here. So the first kind of, item is like, obviously the last year, everyone's been, seeing an increased amount of spend. JR, I think it's the previous slide. I think you jumped a little bit ahead. There. There we go. So, no surprise here, definitely in the last 12 months, everyone's kind of seen a jump in cost. Kubernetes, folks also. So Kubernetes spend has kind of grown more than kind of 2/3 overall, with about half of those folks seeing more than a 20% jump in their overall spend. And if you go to the next slide, obviously most of the spend, comes from compute. This should be kind of no surprise. It's kind of where a good portion of the workloads. I did expect a little bit more on the storage side, but this is basically asking about 200 people from our rough community on response. So the sample size is not the largest, but here's your kind of rough idea of what people are spending money on. Let's go to the next.
Anecdotally, this really aligns to what I've seen like in infrastructure as a service as well, like compute tends to be 80%. So,
I mean, that's where the clouds make the money, to be honest, these days. But yeah, that's interesting to know. So let's move forward. So this is a little interesting thing. So 25% of folks really don't do any form of cost monitoring, and I have some theories around this. It could be the maturity of the tools, lack of open source options, and so on. Very few people implement chargeback. That's also a non-trivial thing. I didn't include this in my introduction, but I spent 5 years working on Twitter's open source infrastructure before kind of cloud native and containers were kind of hip, and chargeback was just painful to implement, in that scale organization. So we had to build a lot of homegrown stuff. Hopefully that improves over time, I think, as the tooling matures. Let's go next slide. Build prediction, oddly, like everyone thinks, a good chunk of people thought build prediction was important, but 25% don't do it. I'm kind of curious how this maps in kind of just the cloud world only, and not only kind of the Kubernetes focus, but I think part of this kind of deals with tools and not having kind of like maybe a strong FinOps culture within the organization. Let's move forward, given a little sensitive time. This was a little bit interesting for me. Like, I'd expect, I expected a little bit more stronger, cloud specific tool usage here. Obviously AWS, rules the roost, given, they're kind of fairly dominant in the Kubernetes world. We have KubeCost, which is kind of mixed open source, vendor-based tool, accountability, so you gotta have a mix of everything. Homegrown tool and spreadsheets still kind of make up, I think, around 25% or so of what people are using, which I think maps to about, I think in this data.finops survey, I think it was about a third were like straight up doing, spreadsheets, still. So yeah, I think, fairly, no dominant winner here at all. And another interesting to think about, like from a Kubernetes context, a big portion of the original motivation outside of just resource efficiency was truly to build something that is multi-cloud specific. So I think what you're seeing here is there's just not, really good kind of multi-cloud options, here. So people are using what they could find on the cloud, and then usually finding another maybe vendor or homegrown built tool to kind of work across clouds to kind of handle their cost management needs. Okay, next slide. I think we are ready for some kind of takeaways and questions for our esteemed panelists. So yeah, spending is up, no surprise here. People think predicting cloud bills are important, but 38% of them can't, or 30% of them could only really truly do it within 10% margins, and about a fifth of them just can't do it, at all. The other thing kind of came up was just the kind of lack of open source options to kind of get started with for projects. In the CNCF world, this is kind of important since it's kind of a very developer first area. So people are going to complain about this. And as I mentioned, about 25% kind of usage of homegrown tools and spreadsheets. So let me ask, a few questions for, our panelists to kind of, get started. So, Kubernetes kind of came around to kind of push the notion of, multi-cloud, abstract a notion of you working directly with machines. So developers think in terms of like, services, deployments, and so on, not specific machines or IPs. Has the notion of adopting Kubernetes, within your organization or practice impacted, how you handle FinOps essentially, and essentially has it made you more efficient? I don't know, I think Kapil was talking about this a little bit yesterday for BN, so it'd be great to kind of hear from an Expedia point of view, given that you used a bunch of tools, orchestration tools, since day one. So. Is Kapil unmuted?
Kapil, you should be.
Thanks, Chair.
There we go.
Yeah, it definitely has, it has definitely upped the expectation from our developers as well. Now that they are able to run the infrastructure so easily, right? They also want that simplicity in their estimation of the cost, because since we have abstracted the concept of the different machine types, now what they expect is a simple unit cost of the infrastructure as well. That if I deploy an application for X number of CPUs and X number of memory, what would be the cost, right? So definitely it has pushed us as a central team, which is providing that kind of reporting functionality, to think about more uniform cost models as well.
Awesome. Vittorio, anything to say on?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from our perspective, I think the basic structures that we set up for Showback before Kubernetes are being applied at the namespace team level within the clusters, so that we can extract the right cost binning, and also being able to understand the CPU to memory ratios was very important to keep visibility up there and play fair, if you will, through different clouds.
So Vittorio, you mentioned you kind of broke things, apart by namespace and so on. So I'm kind of curious, how, what are you seeing in the field, or how is Expedia kind of doing this, where Kubernetes is very flexible with its kind of label structure and namespace thing, where you could kind of label whatever the hell you want. You could break things apart by environment, like dev versus prod, or you could do it by team, product. You could potentially even try to make it work down to like application level. Do you have kind of any lessons to share, maybe from like an Expedia level, couple on kind of the challenges you face and kind of what you've come up with that works, at least for a large scale organization like yours?
Yeah, I think tagging
yeah,
standards.
Go ahead.
Kapil first.
Sure. So from the tagging standpoint, is, as you said, right, implementing the tagging standards has always been a challenge, because different teams are also running their own Kubernetes infrastructure, and they're all following their own tagging standards. And but the good thing is they're all collecting the same level of metrics at container level, task level, instance level, as well as the namespace level. So what we do is we allow that capability to slice and dice the data in different ways and forms, depending on the developer or team's comfort level, regardless, trying to force the same tagging standard. What we still have is a concept of a logical application, where everything ties to a logical metadata application, which is registered in the central metadata repository. And that way is when we are trying to look up the cost from a finance perspective, it is able to roll up at the cost center or department level and stuff like that. Vittorio, you want to add?
Nope, we can't hear you. There you go.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, completely agreed. In our case, we have squads following the SRE model, and we established a requirement for labeling and metrics, so that we have uniformity across the teams and how they label their Kubernetes containers.
Cool. One interesting, question I have is, at least from, container orchestration land, there's been kind of multi-generations, of the technology, right? I spent my early, infrastructure career doing, we built Mesos at Twitter, right? It was kind of this is pre-Kubernetes days, right? There was some companies that were taking the leap into containers before, things were maybe very, mature, or people are just using, straight up, kernel, C groups and so on, to kind of build their own layer. When we were talking yesterday, Kapil, you mentioned that I think Expedia went a similar journey, where you adopted a little bit of, maybe Mesos in the beginning, Nomad, and eventually, maybe Kubernetes. How is that kind of journey amongst these kind of different container platforms? Like, have you had to change essentially how you implement your FinOps practices amongst these different tools? Were there any lessons to kind of carry amongst these changes?
I think instead of changing, it was kind of evolving, that we figured out a lot of shared patterns across different deployments, and that helped us actually implement common APIs to ingest the metrics that we need to charge back the customers on, because for a customer point of view, at the end of the day, they are still talking about the unit cost of a CPU and memory in that respective platform. So we started evolving our chargeback model according to the same standards, and make it simpler for them to move around from Mesos to Nomad to Kubernetes-based platforms. And same thing for the tagging as well, as I said, right? That we introduced that concept of logical applications, which is registered in the metadata system, so that users have, if the same application is deployed in the two different systems, they can compare one-on-one using the unit cost of it.
Awesome. So another interesting question. So when people generally move to Kubernetes, I've seen this notion of like let's build a multi-cloud solution. Some people are using it across clouds, whether using the native Kubernetes service or just running it on EC2 themselves and managing it there, and then also bridging the they maybe had a lot of private data centers and kind of a whole colo setup, right? And they're trying to bridge all those worlds. So as you're aware, like, I don't know, figuring out the cost of like a Kubernetes cluster, on kind of an on-prem, colo setup is a little bit more difficult, right? You kind of have price in capital expenditure and all that stuff. Like, how have the both of you seen like any interesting ways of doing that, or how you essentially handle that challenge, essentially kind of bridging those two worlds?
Victor, you want to go first?
Oh yeah, on-prem and cloud-based. Have you seen?
Yeah, so we've actually moved entirely to public cloud, and we left the on-prem behind us. So that was quite a big move, and so I'm kind of happy to say I haven't had to deal with that.
You're blessed.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, in our case, like we are moving to the cloud completely as well, but there is still a private cloud concept that we have in case we need to move things around. But that chargeback of that private cloud-based Kubernetes platform is still kind of on a back burner. We are more focused on the cloud version because that's what drives the majority of the cost.
Okay, so I guess the solution is basically we care less because that's essentially something that will be deprecated long term.
More static. More static as well, right? So.
Yep. Very cool. And then given I think I have another minute. Any kind of final like lessons to kind of share for folks that are essentially trying to implement FinOps practices on Kubernetes. Like any kind of final nugget that you want to share with folks. This is the first time we're kind of doing this survey. The JR and crew at the FinOps Foundation is going to kind of take it over and kind of grow and include it in their overall data FinOps report, but any nuggets of wisdom or lessons that you kind of want to leave folks as they kind of go ahead and then kind of implement the Kubernetes and container-based cost monitoring.
Yeah, from my side, I can share that the focus should be on consistency of the chargeback model, because if you're doing a daily unit rate or a monthly unit rate, even that won't fly for a long amount of time. So the focus should be on once you have enough amount of usage in the cloud on the container platforms, start driving towards coming up with a unit rate that you can keep static, let's say for a quarter or a couple of months, because that really helps in predictability of the spend for your end consumers, because they would need to forecast the cost and provide the forecast to the finance teams. And if your unit rate is changing on a daily basis, even without the usage changing for the consumer, they're going to be pissed off really. Right, so the main focus should be on keeping the unit cost static as possible.
Dario, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so from my side, I think one of the big focuses that we have is efficiency, and also looking at the waste and idle cost in the clusters, and continually trying to improve that, as well as proper allocation, fair allocation for shared services, which should also, so we should also look at not just the shared services, but how the idle cost is shared across them. It has to be fair. Also the auto scaling components and how to apply savings programs to systems that use auto scaling properly.
Awesome. Thanks for the time and sharing your thoughts. My challenge to the group out here is saluting the vendors and members. I personally would love to see more open source options out there to help kind of democratize and help people get started implementing proper FinOps practice. I do think it's a missing hole, and we could all do better as a community there. But thank you, JR, for giving the opportunity for me to present our little micro survey on Kubernetes and FinOps.
Thank you all for that. As Chris mentioned, we're going to pick this up and make it part of the State of FinOps report next time around. So we'll have a deeper dive into Kubernetes. You see that current report there. Shout out on open source tools. Spotify has Backstage, which CNCF hosts, which I think has some of this information on there. I see Andrew's on the call also. And I want to say we missed one of the intros in the beginning, which was Philip Ho from Box. He just put his intros into the intro channel in Slack. So check that out there if you get a chance. We also have a working group that is kicking off on this. If you go to the containers-Kubernetes Slack room, put your hand up. This group is going to be putting out some updated materials. There's a playbook on FinOps.org as well. That is the start of this. I'm sorry, SIG-containers is the channel there. Read the slides. All right. So from here, we are going to talk about the FinOps framework, which is really the central place where we're putting all this work. The adopting FinOps, the shared costs, the Kubernetes, all this is going in to create a roadmap for the practicing the enterprise. And I want to pass over to Vasilio Markinez-Dasakis, who just joined us last week, who's taken this over.
Hey, thanks, JR. I think this is a great segue from the conversation that just happened around containers. My takeaway from that is really, this is a community. Our members, their experiences, we rely on those, and they help build out the FinOps practice in general. So in that vein, some updates that we've made to the FinOps.org website and the framework itself is your ability to contribute. So when you're on our website, when you're on the FinOps Foundation website, every page will have a function in there for you to propose edits. If you see errors, or if you just have net new stories or experiences you want to share, please contribute. Very much, as I mentioned, we're looking to do a grassroots approach and have you share your experiences for the benefit of the community. Next slide, please, JR. In addition to that, as JR mentioned, we're looking to build out the framework and have it as a central place where folks can come and get advice, explore use cases. And in that vein, what we've done is we made it a little bit easier for you to contribute. If you're a GitHub expert or you love GitHub, you can go straight to GitHub. If you're perhaps not as comfortable with GitHub, the option of using Google Form. And of course, there's also the Framework Slack channel. So please join the Framework Slack channel. Some great conversations happening there. And then last slide, JR. And excited to announce as well our release of vendor member profiles. So introducing the first version, if you kind of click into each vendor member, you'll take a look and see the snapshot, product service overview, resources and videos they've provided. Importantly, their community activity and contributions, and any capabilities and functionality are cross-referenced back to the FinOps framework. Coming soon, we're going to be looking to map and cross-reference functionality and services into the framework itself. And it's just important to know vendor profiles are intended to help and enable our community members to make informed decisions. They're not a rating of the platforms or services provided there. So please, when you have a moment, take a peek and provide feedback. That's it for me, Jared. Thanks.
Thank you, Vaz. Welcome. We're going to do something new this time. I forget if I mentioned it here, where I forgot what I've said where, but we're going to do vendor profiles, showcases on Kubernetes cost management in the breakout at the end of this call, we've never done this before. 91% of you voted for us to do it 2 calls back. So if you want to see the top 3 platforms from that survey that Chris did, they're going to demo back to back to back, showcase style, smackdown, head to head at the end of this. So check out that room. All this framework work is also leading into these certification programs. What we're aiming to do is really provide a roadmap for how to build a practice and a roadmap for how to map certain tooling, whether it be open source or cloud native or platform, against the needs in that. So this is coming together as, I think, what's hopefully going to be a compelling way to help you all accelerate your practices. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Jason Rhodes from Intuit to talk about something that came up a few times today, which is unit cost, and how do we start to drive down unit cost, even though our total cloud spend might be going up, and attach that spend against the business value that's going. Jason, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, JR.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah, let's move forward. And just for those of you that may not know me or heard of me, I'm at Intuit, sort of leading the FinOps space there, and been basically 100% focused on FinOps there for over 5 years now. So lots of battle scars to show from the early days till now. So. All right, so yeah, I know, with the group here that some of you may be sort of in the crawl phase, some walk and some run around unit costs. And so hopefully there's some things here that we can share that can be helpful to you, regardless of sort of where you are in your journey and, the experience level that you have with unit costs. So we're going through what they are and why you would seek to sort of build and manage and maintain unit costs within your business. And then sort of how to make it work, and some tricks and some lessons. We'll be splitting it between things you can do in your business, but not necessarily in your cloud at all, to sort of facilitate unit cost measurement. And then secondly, things you can do inside your cloud to help make sure that it's sort of ready and compatible with what you've done in your business, so that you can get to a unit cost. Unit cost is very much about marrying things that are happening inside your cloud with things that are happening inside your business to provide that sort of composite picture, to help you know where things are going. So let's move forward here, JR. We got a lot of quick hit slides here. So for us in FinOps, a unit cost is the cloud hosting cost incurred in producing and delivering some unit of value. And so again, lots of different types of organizations and enterprises here. So in some cases that might be something sort of revenue focused, cost per customer, cost per dollar of revenue, something like that. There's certainly nonprofits who might measure their success levels in other ways. But a unit could be anything, and it can be something very macro level. So again, something like a cost per customer metric, a simple way to go about that might be to say, well, let's take the entirety of our cloud costs as the numerator on top, and let's take the entirety of our customers, every customer we have, as the denominator on the bottom. And that's a very simple sort of, might be your first foray into unit costs, would be to take these really simple sort of macro things where you can take all of your cloud and divide it by all of something that you measure in your business. As you get more advanced, though, you might want to start to hone in and focus and subset things, and we'll talk about that. But it doesn't also necessarily have to be something totally business focused. For us, like in our own FinOps program, we measure the success of a lot of what we do using unit costs. Things that we do through managing, reserved instances and savings plans, those should drive down the unit costs of cores and RAM, and basically the various costs of different instances and things that people are using. And so we can measure the cost of those units, basically the rates, as a unit cost to measure the success of our own program. So again, it doesn't always have to be something that's a really high level kind of measurement that would maybe only be consumed by your executive suite. It can be, unit costs can be measured to help track discrete programs, or even individual projects to see if the return on a project is as expected. So let's move forward here, Jeremy. Right, and so one of the main value points is that unit costs provide clarity to your efficiency and your effectiveness through changes. So change is a constant in everything that we do. And even if your business happened to be completely, stagnant, period over period, you can rest assured that the cloud is changing tremendously every day, regardless of which one you're using. So it allows you to maintain sort of a clear lens over your efficiency as things are moving. And so again, like a healthy trend might be that your business is quadrupled and your costs have gone up 50%. So seeing your costs go up 50% might be concerning, but when you see that in the context of your business having quadrupled, okay, well maybe that's okay. Maybe especially if a lot of the way that you deliver for your customers is through the cloud, maybe you're okay with that. But at the same time, seeing your costs triple with your business doubling is great, but cost tripling is not great. And if cloud isn't a big part of your spend, that's okay in the short term, but that sort of trend extrapolated out over a long period of time is very unhealthy and would require some corrective action. So again, it just allows you to contextualize your hosting spend through any kind of change that's happening. And again, that can be a technology change or a business change. And let's move forward here. So again, just, there's no one best set of units to measure. I mean, it may be the case that at some point, maybe the foundation will have sort of a checklist of, these are the 5 unit costs everybody should be tracking. But there really isn't, in my mind anyway, any one best set of things that everybody should be measuring. You've really got to know your business and to know what's important to them. And really, if you haven't started on this part of your journey yet, it starts by just understanding, well, what is important, to my business where I am, and that would be helpful to be able to look at it, in terms of hosting unit costs. So we'll get into that next. Yeah. So aligning your business. So this is often the harder part. I mean, most of these things cloud related, we think of them as often big technical challenges, but just like getting FinOps adopted and some of these other things, just aligning and sort of, getting the ducks in a row, so to speak, within the business can be the harder part of this. So what I found and what I think that, especially in a larger group, that you should expect to have to do to get to a place where you know which unit costs are the best candidates and can provide the most value is to engage with different leaders, different folks across the company to understand sort of what their pains are as relates to hosting costs, and where a unit cost would help them just better manage their business and make better decisions. And a really good place to start would be to look at where you maybe have existing KPIs and metrics. So if you're a sales organization, a marketing organization, different product organizations may already have established metrics and KPIs that they're using to track. Maybe that's just some, like revenue growth, customer growth, but it could be other more sort of specific or nuanced metrics that group is managing. And if the growth or decline in those metrics have a good correlation to cloud spend. So again, something like concurrent users or transactions per second, those sorts of things will tend to have really good correlation to your hosting spend, because to grow those things generally means that your cloud will have to scale up to support it. So that's a great place to start, again, in getting your first unit costs established. And if we move forward here. An important thing with unit costs that it is a big part of the challenge as you've sort of gotten along. It can be really fun, when you first put one together and you show people and it gets people excited. But an important thing is continuity. If you're not able to continue to calculate that metric, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year in a consistent fashion, it's going to sort of decay the value of that metric to folks, in making their decisions and steering the ship. So it's important that you have the processes in place, and I use lifecycle management as a big part of that, to ensure that as your business changes, as the cloud changes, that your unit cost continues to be a true representation of what it originally meant to be. And so this is just an example here, but when you're creating new cloud assets, it's important that if that asset is in some way part of a unit cost, that it be mapped to, you know, the business side of things at when it's born, when it's created, so that right away any spend that it's generating becomes part of, you know, anything on the business side that in that unit cost calculation, that it's included immediately, right? If you've got some, oh, we've got to wait for our quarterly data cleanup exercise before, you know, we get those things mapped the right way, then that means that, you know, in that whole period of time where you've got sort of this data problem, your unit cost is going to be off track. And so if that's, again, if there's been a reorg or a shuffle or a merger or something, it's just important that you have the life cycle and sort of change management processes in place so that your unit cost remains true and accurate. And one of the things they'll say here is it's almost easier to make a change in what I'll call a business database, but this might be a CMDB. I heard someone else mention, you know, a metadata, central metadata repository, these sorts of things. What you don't want to do is be asking your army of developers, whether it's you have 10 developers at your company or 10,000, to have to go change how they've tagged things or how they've labeled things, or, you know, make basically technical changes as your business changes or as the cloud changes. You want to structure things in a way that, you know, your tagging structure can absorb, you know, all of the likely change that's going to occur in your business. So like if a department changes names, people shouldn't have to go change all of their tags to reflect that department name change, right? There should be use of immutable tags and keys and things, so that those things like name changes get absorbed transparently, and we can move forward. The other thing is, especially if you've got, you know, Intuit's a really big company. We have got over 10,000 employees. So, but again, this, whether you're much larger than us or a lot smaller, you shouldn't expect everybody at your company to sort of get there at the same time. What I found works really well is to provide for a maturity path. So like for us, you know, some of our groups are much further along in their sort of journey than others. And so they're heavy consumers of unit costs, but others not so much. And so, you know, you don't, you know, it's rare that we're in a position to compel groups to go do something. So what I find works really well is just help the groups that have been successful evangelize that across your company. When one group sees that another is better able to run their business because of an investment they've made, again, whether that's in tagging or in just sort of better business metadata management, that they're able to make quicker and better decisions around how they're running their business. There's, I don't want to call it jealousy, but there's sort of a, you know, the competitive nature and like, hey, I want to have that too. And so that's a really great way of sort of culturally fostering that maturity and that sort of desire to advance across your enterprises, to share those wins as the sort of trailblazing groups going forward. So I've got only another minute left here, so we'll jam through this. Tagging is only part of things, especially, and we've great Kubernetes conversation earlier. A lot of the thinking early on was that, you know, tags was the way that you could get there, but don't necessarily constrain yourself to tags. You can sometimes consider large groups or small groups of accounts, certainly resource level things with tags. But as you get into Kubernetes, now I need to know the cost of my namespaces to maybe certain namespaces should be included in this unit cost and others shouldn't be. So think of the cloud as a hierarchy of grains where you can encapsulate in different scopes of things, you know, into your different unit costs, and just allow for flexibility in that as you go. And we can move forward here, Jeremy. Yeah, and again, some greater granularity and completeness of attribution are signs of increasing maturity. So what I found works really well is, again, just start off with really coarse-grained, high-level macro metrics. And as groups evolve and as you help them evolve to do things more precisely, that's where you really you can drill down, get out the microscope, and start, you know, tagging individual resources and groups of resources and breaking apart, you know, shared multi-tenant costs to provide much more sort of micro, small level unit cost type data. And I think that we got one more, and that's it. Yeah. The last thing here too that we found works really well is, you know, in FinOps, you may not be blazing the trail of how you sort of enforce company-wide tagging and things. You may have security or compliance type initiatives that got there first, depending on what's important to your company. So you can piggyback on patterns that they've established for doing things like tag enforcement or lifecycle management around the business side of things. So hopefully you're not having to blaze the trail for FinOps. So look to where those groups have done that for you and take advantage of their investments in your space if you can. That's all I got.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. We're doing a breakout here. So if you have more questions for Jason, he has a bunch more content. And I can't stress the importance of this whole area enough. Like we started in the book, like start with unit cost in mind, and in there, like start this conversation early, because otherwise you're going to have that chat about, I'm sure you all have, about we're spending too much. It's like, well, are we spending too much, or are we spending the right amount? And this type of business data will get us there. Great. So we're almost to the breakouts. A couple more bits here. Stacy, I think you may have touched on some of this in the beginning, but you want to give a quick shout out on what courses are coming up?
Yep. So we are sold out for the July course. But go to FinOps.org and look at different certifications. We have scheduled all of our instructor-led training throughout the end of the year. So please check that out. Also, if you go to Self-Paced and you want to get a 15% discount, I created Summer 15. That is the code, Summer 15, from now through the end of the month, and you'll get a 15% discount off of the Self-Paced course, the FinOps certified self-paced course only. That's it. Oh, hey, and guess what, everyone? Next week, July 12th, we're launching that FinOps for Engineers course too. So exciting.
It's also my 40th birthday, July 12th. Let's say
which is why we're launching the FinOps for Engineers course.
You're not going to be here. You're going to launch it by yourself. Excited to see that come out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy. And Tracy, over to you.
Hi, so this is the state of the FinOps. We're just going to skip this month, but we're going to go into detail a little bit more next month. So just go ahead. As you remember from previous member calls, we have openings in the TAC. We have 3 openings right now. And we want you. Actually, we already have people, so let's support the people who are already interested. So go ahead and move forward. And I want to talk a little bit about what the TAC elections look like. So we have 3 open slots, obviously, 2 for practitioners, and 1 will be decided by the governing board. The vote will take place by the TAC on July 20th at 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and a whole bunch of other times if you can figure that out. And they will do an online ranked vote based on candidate packets. So let's talk a little bit about candidate packets. Next slide. Oh, let's talk about the candidates first, and then we'll talk about the candidate packets. I can't remember my own slides. So we have 6 people who are interested in being your representative on the TAC. Again, we have 3 slots open, 2 for practitioners, 1 decided by the governing board. Everybody in this group is fantastic. You've probably heard from them. They're very active in the community. They've worked on working groups like the FinOps for Engineers, or they're working on financial services, or they work with government. They've given presentations, they've given talks, they're very active in Slack, they're incredibly helpful. So these are the people who are interested in running. These are your candidates. We will have, these slides will be exported and put in the general channel after the call, so you don't have to try and memorize what their names are. But now let's talk about the process for the candidates and the packets. So obviously we have the candidates, they have an interest in participating, in being in the TAC. What we want them to do, just to show their commitment, is create this packet, and it just contains a paragraph explaining why they want to be involved in the TAC, what they think they'll bring. And then we're asking for 5 practitioner endorsements for their election packet. And this is just to show, particularly because these are practitioner spots, that they are going to be representative of you as the community. So we want you as practitioners to get involved. We want you to know who your TAC members are. We want you to build a relationship with the TAC. And so how do you do endorsements? Next slide. What does that look like? It's basically just a few sentences of why you think someone will be good on the TAC. And there are a couple of different reasons why you can endorse people. This is obviously not an exhaustive list. Maybe you feel like they bring a unique perspective. As I mentioned, we have people in the government, we have people from financial services, we have people from tech, we have people from Europe who are candidates there. We have a wide variety of candidates. Maybe you feel like there is something missing in the current TAC in terms of representation. Maybe you've worked with them on a working group or in a SIG, or maybe you asked a question in our Slack channel and they were incredibly helpful. Maybe you know them personally in this big old crazy world that is also a small world of FinOps, and you just want to endorse them. And so this is your opportunity here as a practitioner to get involved, to give an endorsement of a candidate that you like. You can give endorsements to as many candidates as you want. You're not limited to one candidate. You can give endorsements of every candidate if you like them all. But what we're just looking for is those 5 candidate endorsements. And next slide. I don't remember what it says. Okay, so if you want to give an endorsement, there are a couple of ways we can go about this. The easiest way is to reach out to me in Slack, and I will get you to the right document. I will get you in touch with the right candidate. If you can also reach out to the candidate, I gave them a warning that I was going to be talking about this today. So if you can also reach out to the candidates may also be asking you individually if they feel like they can. And just go ahead and get that working, get that moving. I am asking that all endorsements be finished by the end of day Pacific Daylight Time on the 19th, because voting will take place on the 20th. So I think that's enough time. We're not asking for you to write a novella. We're just asking for a couple of sentences why you think they're good. And so that's the candidate process. And then next month, we'll probably come back and be introducing the new members of the TAC to you. So look forward to that. And thanks.
Thank you for working out this process. It's taken a long time to get here, and to the TAC for working through this process. I'm glad we're getting there. We're going to run the same thing next month for the governing board. So if you want to put your hand up for that as well. Quick moment of self-care. I don't have any water. I wish I did. Ran out of my coffee and my water. Thanks to the FinOps team, also growing fantastically. We've got a new hire to report next month, our new director of marketing. We always need help. Actually, right now I'm looking for somebody to help edit videos. If anybody wants to go through our archive and help pull things out, let us know.